The current media landscape has been trashing the Oklahoma City Thunder strategy for a while at this point, and I don't know what else I'd expect from your LA and New York outlets that have the advantage of picking up whoever they want in free agency and having that pull in the NBA. Last week, we talked about the Lakers, and maybe that's their problem, is that they're playing my league and picking up 8 dudes every summer during free agency. It's been a historic thing for the Los Angeles Lakers. But for small market teams, they don't have that advantage. Look at the small market success in the past decade or so. The Chiefs winning the Super Bowl, the Royals in the World Series, the Rays' dominance, the way the Astros got to the World Series. They're all homegrown teams that built their teams from the ground up after years of struggling and losing. The Thunder are a part of a multi-year tank, and the media dislikes it, but it's what they must do. Small market NBA teams don't win titles. And on the rare occasion that they do, it's because they drafted well and developed players. Look at the Bucks last year. But other than that, it's been a lot of California teams and a lot of big city teams. The media does not understand the tank. The Thunder aren't going to get LeBron in free agency like the Lakers. They don't stand a chance of getting Kyrie or KD like the Nets did. And they can't ink a deal with Jimmy Butler like Miami did. So they're forced to resort to stashing picks and tanking. Don't like it? Don't support a team that first forces their hand into doing that. They have a nice core right now in Shea, Dort, Giddey, and company, but if they want to be a serious threat in the future, they got to keep on adding young guys who will buy in, develop, and the only way to do that is through the draft. Sam Presti has made some good and masterful trades to get OKC in a good spot to rebuild, but rebuilding starts with a tank.
Yeah, and I've seen in the people in the media, especially on Twitter, they will refer to the Thunder right now as the black eye of the NBA about the way that they're tanking and whatnot. And that doesn't make sense to me because the Pistons were tanking last year. The Rockets were tanking last year. Both those teams are still tanking now. But you don't see anybody calling them the black eye of the NBA. So it just doesn't make sense to me, especially when the Thunder moved to OKC in 2008. So it's just over a decade now of them being a franchise in Oklahoma City. And since 2008, they had, up until last year and this season, before that, they had 11 straight winning records. They had KD, who they drafted after tanking. They had Russell Westbrook, who they drafted when they weren't good. James Harden, who they drafted when they weren't good. So it's always been a team that's built from the ground up, but they were just so good at hitting on their draft picks that it lasted for a decade of success, and people seem to forget how they got to where they were.
Yeah, the media just doesn't like Oklahoma City for some reason. You know, like you mentioned, Houston was horrible last year. I think, you know, you could argue that they were better than the Thunder. I don't know. Sometimes they looked disgusting, and I felt bad for Coach Silas because I think his hand was forced into a bad situation as the head coach. But the Thunder were a great team all the way up until, like you said, the past couple of years. They were in the playoffs almost every year. They made a run to the finals back in 2012 and lost to one of the best teams to ever hit the basketball court in the Big Three in Miami. The Thunder, like I said, were good. So now that they shift 2 years and the media is bashing on them so hard, I just don't get it. They have a nice core. You got to rebuild. And they don't get that attention. And we're going to talk about that attention here in a second. But the Lakers, you look at all the posts they get, and it's cool when they hit free agency, but the Thunder don't have that. I mean, it's tough. The Thunder, you have to tank. I don't get why people can't respect that.
Yeah, and there's just multiple other teams that are bad. I mean, what has the Orlando Magic done outside of when Dwight Howard left? I mean, they've been stuck in mediocrity. They've maybe made the 8th seed in the weakened Eastern Conference, and they'll go and they'll get swept or they'll lose in 5. But they don't go out and they don't sign anybody. They don't ever make any moves. They don't make an active decision to try and put the franchise in a better position. But people just seem to be okay with it for some reason, and I don't know if it's because Orlando is a bigger market than OKC. I'm not sure if I would consider Orlando a large market, but they're definitely not a small market either. I mean, they're down in Florida on the coast. Like, there's an appeal there for players to sign. But I think the free agent thing is a huge part of this because they can't go out and they can't just sign people. I mean, all good things have to come to an end, but Sam Presti did a great job of making it last as long as he possibly could. I mean, he was able to flip assets for Oladipo and Sabonis, who he got for Orlando, and he traded away Serge Ibaka, one of the core pieces of when they went to the finals. Then after a year or two, he flipped Oladipo and Sabonis to bring in Paul George. And Russell Westbrook and Paul George went on for have a good couple of seasons, and that kept them relevant and a contending team for a while some more. So Sam Presti really did run the course on this to make sure that he got the most out of what he could. But at the same time, the Thunder are a great organization, and they highly respect their players. And you go and you look at anybody that's ever been a part of the Thunder's organization, that's all you're going to see. You're going to see great things about them. And they have a lot of respect for their players. So when they realize that, hey, we're not in a position to win, and you're a seasoned vet, and you deserve a chance to go get a ring, then we're going to help you do that. That's what they did with Paul George. That's what they did with Russell Westbrook when they shipped him off. I'm sure OKC didn't really want to get rid of Paul George or Russell Westbrook, but they realized it was in the best decision for them as a franchise and for the player themselves because, like I said, they're just a professionally run franchise, better than most of the league.
Yeah, same with Chris Paul. They did the same thing, and similar to what they did with Paul George and Russell Westbrook, not only did they let him go to a team where they could win, but they let him pick the team. Like Paul George wanted to go to LA, so they gave him to the Clippers. Chris Paul, he had a list of teams, and they said, all right, we'll let you get some leeway and figure out what's best for you. So he goes to Phoenix, and in his first year there, he takes him to the finals. But the thing that the Thunder that, I don't know, just blows my mind, that people thought that the tank would only be last year, and they're upset when the Thunder started off 1-5. Like, a tank is not a one-year thing. It can't be. You have to do multiple years to get those draft picks. And you looked at the Thunder's draft picks for the coming years, you can't expect them to just be done 1 year and they have 700 draft picks until 2026. This is a multi-year thing, and you can't get upset when it doesn't last just 1 year, especially when they had a bad draft lottery and fell to number 6 in the draft when they had a chance to get picks number 1 and 5. And that could have sped up the rebuild, but it's not the way the lottery works. So give the Thunder some time because tanks don't happen overnight, and you get guys like Shea that are bought in, and it'll happen.